Good afternoon, Andy Steele from 360 Accountants. How you doing?
Very well, thank you, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us. So, just get straight in. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, for how long you've been doing it for, please.
Yes, I'm Andy Steele. I'm the one of the directors at 360 Chartered Accountants. I've been a chartered accountant, stroke business advisor since 1990. So 32 years, and I set up 360 Accountants back in February 2010. So we had our 12th birthday not too long ago.
Good stuff. Nice to hear. So, with that length of time that you've been in 360 Accountants, obviously there was something called a pandemic recently that was still, I suppose, tail end of, fingers crossed. What was the biggest impact for you in your business of that?
Obviously, COVID was a horrible time for everybody. Wish it had never happened, wish it would go away. Sure, everybody thinks the same. Just looking at it from a purely business perspective, I guess, I hesitate to use the word many, but many businesses have found negatives and positives from the experience.
Yeah.
I suppose from 360's perspective, the biggest negative would be it did hinder the development of our trainee accountants, particularly at the start of the pandemic when they were having to work from home in isolation. A lot of the younger members of the team that were perhaps still living with parents, perhaps had younger siblings, homeschooling, etc. Many of them struggled a little bit with the IT, the environment, but really missed having more experienced members of the team, sitting in the same room as them, giving them guidance, offering advice and assistance immediately rather than having to organise a Zoom or a Teams call, etc. And I think when you're not just in accountancy, but when you're in any office environment, you learn by seeing how your sort of more experienced members of the team behave, listening to telephone conversations that they're having with customers, suppliers, etc. And I think they really missed that, and their development was hindered. So I think that's probably the biggest negative, and it's probably indicative of society in general. It tended to be the younger people that suffered the most, in my opinion. Looking at it in a more positive way, I suppose what it did do is it made us and forced us use IT better. Whether it be starting to use video conferencing more often, more effectively, going paperless. But I think the biggest positive from our perspective was that we did win a lot of new business during COVID, because a lot of our competitors, if I'm honest, they disappeared. They furloughed departments, furloughed members of the team, etc., which I found quite surprising, really, because COVID was every business owner's hour of need. I can't imagine a time when they've ever needed their accountant more, and to sort of disappear and sort of shut your offices and stop responding to clients was not good, in my opinion. So we upped our game in terms of communication. We pledged to help any business that needed help, whether they were clients of ours or not. And we won a lot of business and a lot of positive feedback from local media, etc., on the back of that. So yeah, I think that was the biggest positive, or the biggest positives from our perspective.
Sure. Yeah, providing that support for clients is important, customers, and it sounds like you're successful in doing that through the pandemic. So they're sort of the couple of actions that you've taken. How are they working sort of beyond the pandemic now?
Well, I mean, I mentioned going paperless. We've probably been 80% paperless since day one of our business. That last sort of 20% was just proving a little bit too difficult in our minds.
Yeah.
So when Boris stood up on that horrendous, I think it was an evening, wasn't it, and said, we're closing the country down, you've got to work from home, and I think he gave us 2 or 3 days notice, didn't he? So yeah, I know first day in the office after that horrendous evening, the first thing that we needed to discuss, as well as obviously the health and safety of the team and the well-being of the team, is how we're going to go 100% paperless, because our business can't function if we're not able to review files, process files, etc.
Sure.
So the team came up with a way of doing it, and bang, we did it. And it took about 4 or 5 hours. So you're sort of thinking, well, if it was that easy, why didn't we do it sooner? So sometimes it's good when your hand is forced, isn't it? When you've got no option but to find a solution, you generally find one. So that's still serving us well now, even though we're back in the office now. We still do everything electronically, everything digitally, which is much more efficient. We've also opened an office in York now, so being paperless means we don't have to lug paper files from one office to the other, and it's better for the environment.
Excellent, good stuff. So what does the future look like for you guys? What do you see as the main challenges going ahead from this point?
I suppose if we as accountants tend to do well if our accountants are doing well, and if our clients are struggling, then we do less well. So Brexit is obviously a concern for many businesses at the moment, although that seems to have been overtaken more recently with inflation, the cost of things going up. I'm meeting clients on a regular basis who are saying, I suppose the biggest challenges most businesses are facing at the moment is retention of staff, recruitment of staff, supply chain issues, but also inflation. And if you're a business where you're having to buy products in order to sell them, or you're buying products in order to turn them into something else, or if you're in construction, prices continually going up present you with real challenges. So when you're tendering for work, what price do you use for your raw materials? If you're having to recruit new people, how much are you going to have to be paying them? How long should we keep quotes open for? So 2 or 3 years ago, you'd probably, many businesses would leave quotes open indefinitely, but you just can't do that now, can you? Because in a week's time, if they haven't been accepted, everything might have changed. So
it could be hourly as well at this point. Some of the way things have been going.
Yeah, so so difficult times always give opportunities to entrepreneurial people, people that can spot opportunities, people that are able to adapt quickly, particularly if you're in a business that is established, has perhaps got profit and cash reserves, and can act on opportunities that are spotted in the marketplace quickly. And the same goes for us. So when times are hard, then businesses start wanting accurate management information, financial information, perhaps more regularly than they have in the past. They need help with credit control systems. They need all sorts of advice and assistance, and funding, grants, etc. So difficult times are by definition difficult, but they will give us plenty of opportunities to look at going forwards.
Cool. So kind of moving on to yourself as a business owner, what would you say the biggest learning is that you've had over the years that you've been running the business?
I mean, every day is a learning day, isn't it? I know it's a cliche, but that's never more true when you're running a business. You know, as a business owner, I've learned how to adapt my business with the help of my team in a global pandemic. I mean, that when I was studying for my exams back in the 90s, that wasn't covered. Who'd have thought we'd have a war in Europe? You know, that no one was ready for that, were they? Perhaps we should have been, and I'm sure in the future we will be. But yeah, I suppose the thing I've learned the most, and it's seeing how brutal running a business can be on certain people. It's look after yourself. You know, it's absolutely pointless building a successful business and, you know, selling up for loads of money when you're 45, 55, 65. If you've run yourself into the ground, you know, and so I've learned the importance of looking after myself both physically and mentally, but also, you know, making sure I spend enough time with friends and family and doing things that I enjoy. Because if you don't do these things, you're just going to burn out and you're going to make bad decisions. You won't make as much profit. And it'll take you longer to reach your desired size of business or retirement date. So yeah, look after yourself.
So good learning. So if you were to go back in time and speak to yourself at 18, would that be the advice you'd give, or is there anything else that you'd?
I do wish I'd looked after myself more in the early days of my business. It's very hard, because you have to put a lot of hours. Many business owners have to put a lot of hours in when they set a business up. But I suppose I had a light bulb moment one day. It was a client that I was discussing it with. They said, you know, usually everyone has a to-do list, and, you know, everyone beats themselves up when they don't get the to-do list done. But is the world really going to end if you don't get all 10 things done by tomorrow? You know, so prioritizing, I think, is a massive thing. Not beating yourself up when you don't get everything done. And another piece of sage advice I heard from a really successful client once was that sometimes good is good enough. And I'll just let that sink in for a minute. You know, I think business owners usually set themselves very, very high standards, and if they don't hit 100% every day, I think they sometimes beat themselves up a little bit. But what you've got to remember is that your customers, your competitors, your suppliers, they don't know that you haven't actually hit 100% today, and usually they're quite happy with 70, 80, 90%. So yeah, sometimes just remind yourself that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes good is good enough.
Stuff like it. So what would you say is inspiring you currently? It could be friends, family, your team members, the business, or anything that you might be reading, listening to.
So I'm going to say that the youth of today are what inspires me. I think this last 2.5 years, I think that generally they've behaved impeccably. I think that if my generation, and probably the generation before me, been told to stay in the houses to protect other people from an illness that probably isn't going to affect you, I imagine there would have been riots and all sorts of things going on. I mean, you just look at what happened during, you know, miners' strikes, poll tax, etc. I think the youth of today really do need to be thanked for the sacrifices that they've made these last few years. You know, whether it be missing out on exams, last day at school, proms, 16th birthday party, 18th birthday parties. They've sacrificed so much, and generally, I think 99.9% of them have followed the rules impeccably, whereas I suspect older members of the population, it's probably nearer 50%. I've got no evidence to back that up whatsoever. And I just hope that the government and future governments look after them and thank them for the sacrifices that they've made. I also think the youth of today are really setting older members of the population a good example in other things like, you know, tolerance, being more accepting of people that are different. You know, I think schools generally are a much happier learning environment than they were probably when you or I were children. I think it's much easier for kids these days to be a little bit different than it was in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And sometimes I think they don't get enough recognition for that. So yeah, the people that inspire me are the youngsters of today. And I think our country is in very good hands, much better than the hands that are currently trying to run the country.
Like that answer. Yeah, I think they deserve a lot of credit for the last couple of years for what they missed out on. So in terms of just wrapping up then, any sort of latest news about your business that you'd like to share?
Well, we're just in the process of launching the 360 Foundation, which is we're trying to get it into registered charity status, but we've got a pot of cash thanks to a really successful golf day that we held. And given the current cost of living crisis, what we're hoping to do is identify financially disadvantaged young people in the HU1 to HU9 postcodes that are at risk of dropping out of grassroots sport because they or their carers aren't in a financial position to pay for their sports subscriptions, kits, travel, etc. We just started promoting it on social media actually, and the sort of the requests for information are just starting to come through. So yeah, rather than talk about what's going on at 360 Accountants, I'd rather just have a little plug for our foundation, if you don't mind. So
yeah, of course.
So yeah, I guess a shout out to the coaches, volunteers, football, rugby, gymnastics, swimming, hockey clubs that may have children from those postcodes in them. You know, if you just get a sense that someone is perhaps not going to turn up next season because the parents are struggling financially, let us know and we'll see if we can help.
Brilliant. It's like a really good cause. Fantastic. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate your time, and all the best with the foundation and the future of the business.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you today. I've really enjoyed it.
You're most welcome.